Our fifth philosopher is Xunzi. Xunzi is going to be 3rd century BC, so we're getting towards the end of our timeline here. And Xunzi is the consummate Confucian. Now, we've had a lot of bickering back and forth that Confucius, Mozi, Mencius, now we got Taoists in there saying you're all full of crap to begin with. Now we finally have a Confucian who's going to say, you know, I'm going to take all the insights of previous philosophers and I'm going to give the most complete distillation of Confucian ideology. I'm going to use all the logic, the emotionally powerful anecdotes of Mozi and Mencius, and I'm going to sort of rescue Confucianism from the uncertainty, the attacks of someone like Xunzi, one of these Taoists who says there's no fixed realities. And as you know, that's a recipe for chaos. That's a recipe for anarchy. We can absolutely create a harmonious society. Confucian ideas are the way to do it. We just need someone who's going to systematically nail down the specifics, use logic and evidence, and emotion in order to give the greatest discourse of Confucian ideas. So I often refer to Xunzi as the greatest Confucian that we have. It's ironic because Mencius is much more famous. Xunzi did not get a Latinized version of his name. I don't know what it would be anyways. It'd be pretty tough. What would it be? Shuntius? It would be very tough to Latinize his name. But regardless, Xunzi is probably the most complete, the most eloquent of all the Confucians. I actually quite enjoy reading Xunzi, but he's marginalized by Mencius. Mencius has those pithy, emotionally powerful anecdotes. Xunzi is a lesson. You're reading him and he's giving you a lesson. He's schooling you in Confucian orthodoxy. And his other big thing that really brings him down, his legacy afterwards, is that unlike Mencius, he says the opposite. He says human nature is evil. Okay? Saying human nature is evil is going to make it hard for any future state to adopt you as the official ideological face of their regime. As I said before, very few states are going to be willing to basically say, you know what? We think you're all evil, and the job of our state, of our bureaucratic functionaries, is to rein in your worst impulses and rule over you. That's just not going to go over very well. States want to have a positive ideology. They want to say you're good, but you're lazy, ignorant, and stupid, and we're educated and enlightened, and we're going to help you out. We're going to help realize your inner goodness, not you're hopelessly evil, and there's nothing that can save you. We're going to help you out. Xunzi, though, was much more cynical. You might say much more pragmatic. He says, no, we're absolutely evil. And left to our own devices, it's not possible to create society. What you need to do is you need to understand how we transform human beings from their evilness into goodness. It's a hard, laborious process, but it can be done. We have been doing it. We will continue to do it. And that's how you create a society that actually works. Xunzi, that's anarchy. Okay? So one of the cardinal features of Xunzi's philosophy is transformation. Hua. Transformation. Right? He says, humans, because we're evil, because left to our own devices, we will do immoral things. We must transform ourselves. And this is not, a feel-good process, right? It's similar to how you transform metal in the forge or a crooked branch into a bow. All right, it's carving, it's cutting, you gotta transform someone against their will into something useful. And it's not easy, it's not fun, it's painful, but the end result is beautiful. Okay, it's beautiful. The axe head that you forged, the sword that you forged in 1,000-degree heat, the crooked branch that you turned into a beautiful bow, or a spear, or a post for a house. The end result is beautiful. But again, you're going to need a life coach to tell you how to do this transformation. Confucianism is all about transformation. They're always talking about we're going to transform the people. We're going to transform the people and realize their inner goodness. Or transform them from evil to good, whether or not you're an adherent of Mencius or Xunzi. What is the means of transformation? It's education and learning. All right, and education and learning, as we learned earlier, is essentially the rites, rituals. The board of rites is what has control over education. Xunzi famously says that the babies of barbarians and civilized people all cry the same at birth. They all have the same whelp. They all cry the same. There's no difference between us at birth. Only education and rites makes them different later on. Right? In other words, you might say this is nature versus nurture. And Xunzi, the Confucians, come down solidly on the side of nurture, not nature. Again, like we saw before, this is an argument in favor of the idea that there's no racial essence to Chinese, what is defined as Chinese throughout Chinese history. It's largely cultural. It's a set of adapted practices that anyone can adopt. And if you adopt them, the rites, the rituals, you too can become civilized and educated. And the barbarians don't. Our babies cry exactly the same at birth. But our education and rights transforms us into civilized people, whereas theirs does not, and they remain barbarians. One of Xunzi's grossest analogies is an orchid flower. He says, or he starts off with an orchid root, because he wants to get it before it's blossomed. He says, an orchid root soaked in urine is odious. But not soaked in urine, it will blossom into a fragrant flower. Okay, it's kind of gross. Yes, one of the most lofty concepts of Confucianism is being expressed by someone peeing on a flower, but his point is the same. Right? He's saying it's the context, it's the environment that truly makes something beautiful or unbeautiful, civilized or uncivilized. And if you do the equivalent of peeing on young people, they will not become civilized. They will not become educated. You need to get them education, which is essentially, in this context, education of rituals and the rites. He's also going to defend the Confucian filial piety hierarchy. This is why some people criticize the Confucians as being sort of fatalists. This was Mozi's argument when he was trying to attack filial piety and Confucius. They're all fatalists. They say that everyone has their place and you can't really move up. It's not entirely true, but there is a kernel of truth to that argument. You can certainly see how Confucianism can be criticized as being fatalistic. We all have our place and whatnot, even though there's plenty of social mobility throughout Chinese history. Xunzi also is going to come back. Remember we had Mencius with his rectification of names. You all have your place and your responsibility. They're lofty responsibilities, but if you carry it out, then you truly earn that title and the perks that go with it. Xunzi is going to come back to this and have another example. He says, society cannot function if we are all equal. All right, so it's impossible. You can't have two kings who rule together. That doesn't work. You can't have two people who have the equivalent authority of a father in the household. Between the mother and the father, they can't be equal. One has to have authority over the other. If they're totally equal, they're going to be at loggerheads. They're going to be constantly fighting to establish who is truly on top. Okay? So he says, equality and inequality and hierarchy are necessary for society. He's unabashed in praising inequality. All right, and he uses this example. Why is humankind? Why do people attain mastery over the beasts? He says, man is noble because he works together. And working together in large groups allows us to attain mastery over the beasts, over the animals of the world. We're the ones in charge. Cattle aren't domesticating us. We're domesticating them. Why do we rule over the beasts and not vice versa? Because we organize ourselves to work together in large groups. Well, what does organization require? Why are we able to organize ourselves? Because we have a hierarchy. You cannot have an organization that works well together if everyone in that organization is perceived as equal. It just doesn't work that way, he says. You have to have inequality. You have to have a hierarchy. People have to know their place, or it's going to be constant bickering. Sometimes I'm probably against my better judgment, I'll point this out in a classroom when I'm teaching as well. And I'll say, what if we all had thought that, we're given the equal authority of being a professor? Could we run this class? You don't like to point out the power hierarchy in the classroom because you like to feel like we're all in this together and whatnot. But hey, let's be honest with ourselves. I have the power. I'm the one who gets to walk to the front of the room, stand behind the lectern, and talk. You can only talk if you raise your hand, and even then, I have to call on you. All right, that's kind of, those are all indications of inequality. But we go along with it because the end result, we hope, if it goes well, is that we all achieve our higher aim. We all want to learn. But if we're all equal, if there's more than one professor, just like more than one king, that's not going to work. And this is what makes us noble. It's not just he's defending inequality. He says inequality is great. We have to have inequality. Someone's got to be in charge, a finely graded hierarchy. Every marvelous thing humankind has done is due to inequality. And filial piety is what he's talking about, knowing your place and your responsibilities to everyone else around you, both above you and below you. Even the emperor, in theory, has someone above him, heaven. That's why he's the son of heaven. Xunzi also gives the most complete distillation of ritual and music. Music as seen as a form of ritual, the actual act of performing music, whether it involves dance, singing, instruments, and whatnot, that is a form of ritual. What Xunzi essentially does with the rituals is because a lot of times with earlier philosophers, they're talking about the rites, the rituals and whatnot, and you're like, what exactly does this mean? You're kind of vague and whatnot. Xunzi isn't the slightest bit vague about the rituals. All right, he gives very full examples, elaborate examples of what exactly a ritual is and why we have to have them. It's kind of a very Freudian explanation when you get into it. He says, rites and music, which is a form of a rite, safely regulate and satisfy potentially dangerous desires and urges and social tensions that will come out, that will manifest in dangerous ways if unsatisfied. If the ritual does not, ameliorate potentially dangerous tensions and needs that we as human beings have, we'll suffer the consequences later on. One of the best examples that Xunzi provides to illustrate what he means by the utility of rituals and going through proper rites is the funeral. He essentially says, when people in our life pass away, we're often not ready really to properly grieve for them. But it's important that we do. It's important both to show respect for the person who's passed away, and it's important for you to go through the grieving process. Like I said, this is sort of a Freudian type of way of interpretation. So a funeral. He's very specific about what it's going to do, how you arrange the funeral to make sure that you go through the process, even if you're not ready for it. Life's busy. You might be stressing out about money. You're going to the job. Maybe you're arguing with your spouse. Your kids are whining and whatnot. It's tough to sometimes be ready to grieve and go through, do the things that you need to process at the time that it actually happens. So he says, here's what you have to do to a funeral. You got to hire someone. You got to hire a Confucian ritual specialist who has his knowledge of the Golden Age, who can tell you this is exactly how a funeral is supposed to be done. This is why Mozi once criticized the Confucians basically as the ambulance chasers of the ancient world. They're all ambulance chasers. Every time they hear that someone's died, they're very happy because most of the Confucians didn't make a living by actually becoming an advisor of a king. Most of them made a living by being ritual specialists for all the things, that have to be done throughout your life. And so Xunzi says, all right, you need to disguise the corpse. Corpses are kind of gross, all right? They aren't beautiful, as you might expect. He says you have to make the corpse look nice, makeup, preservation, put regular clothes on it. This way you'll recognize this as your father. And you won't be revolted by the process of decay. If you're revolted by it, then the necessary emotions won't surface. Then you need to put food in front of them, all right? A bowl of rice or whatever it might be. And that will help you realize that they're being served as though they're alive. This is dinner time, but then the rice never gets eaten. And so that realization is what allows you to realize, oh my God, he's truly gone because that rice is not getting eaten. Again, these are the elements, the specific elements of one particular ritual that he's reminding you. This is why you have to hire a Confucian ritual specialist. We'll do this properly, and you'll go through the grieving process. Now, funerals are a grieving process, all right? But all rituals, you can talk about all rituals in this way, all right? Think about rituals today. Sometimes you talk about rituals, and you're like, oh, it's very Chinese, Confucian ideology and whatnot. It's hard to really put it into proper context. We have constant rituals in our own life. Singing happy birthday is a ritual. And you'll know these are rituals if you don't do them, if you skip them. Then you realize, wait, hey, how come we didn't do happy birthday? How come no one celebrated? How come this person didn't give me a gift? I thought this gift, I had a good relationship with this person. They didn't send me a gift, or they sent you a gift that is not commensurate with the relationship, the importance of the relationship that you thought. All right, these are the social awkwardnesses of rituals. And the Confucian specialist will basically tell both of you, all right, you are this person, this is the nature of your relationship with this person, that means that this sort of gift should be given to confirm and embody this relationship so that both sides have no awkwardness and aren't bitter at the other one. Okay? But these sorts of things, you don't sing happy birthday, you don't get presents, something like that. We have all kinds of rituals in our lives. Xunzi, I think, is very relevant to us today. And he's the one who really talks about these sorts of rituals and how useful that they are. Even though Xunzi sort of gets short shrift, and he's not often the Confucian philosopher that people are talking about, he gives the most fullest extrapolation, and I find it to actually be the most convincing. For me, when I'm reading all the different Confucian philosophers, I don't find Mencius and his emotionally powerful anecdotes to be all that emotionally powerful. I see it sort of like as Xunzi might criticize it, very manipulative, and you can see through it quite easily. Xunzi is much more sophisticated, a lot more of the logic, much more comprehensive, and very attractive. Sometimes you read it, you're like, yeah, you know what, that makes sense. That this is that rituals are important. Anyways, he gives the most eloquent explanation of all the major Confucian concepts. And many later Confucians and philosophers will be invoking his ideas, even though they're often going to be giving credit to Mencius while thinking that they're talking about Confucius. See how this all works out? These three Confucian philosophers have a very interesting relationship long after they're dead. All right, we only have one more left, Han Feizi, who introduces yet another school of philosophical thought, the legalists.